Hola, hola. I'm Trek with 2Ks,
And I am 3D, and welcome to Metaverses The Other Side.
brought to you here on the Gentleman of Crypto Network. Just a heads up, this episode is before we had the idea of bringing the Twitter spaces to the Gentleman of Crypto Network. And so that's why we're talking about the stuff that we're talking about in this episode.
Okay, so basically what we're talking about is recently there was someone who managed to reverse a transaction, so to speak. And when we don't really mean reverse actual transaction, we mean he was able to get funds pulled from the burn address. So there's this OXO address they use. They call it burn address. Basically, you send something to it. No way to retrieve it. It's supposed to be locked up. That's it. Can't get to it. It's the whole point of it, other than being a burn address. And someone was able to pull funds from the burn address from an exploit on Polygon or Matic. Basically, there is a chance where just requesting funds from it and doing something really specific to signing hash in order to almost appear as the burner address holder to obtain funds from it. And he received something like 2 million out of the exploit. And from my understanding, he doesn't have to give it up or anything. I don't know if he's actually going to what he's into with it, if he said. But this kind of shows like there's a lot of things that we do that are blockchain actions that we revolve around the ideal of burning, where it's burning the NFT, saying that, as in to use the NFT. And there's also a lot of times where funds are burned, where proof of, to prove you own the wallet, sometimes they want you to send an X amount of, digits to the burner address. Well, in this case, it'd be EVM, so Ethereum, things like that, or Matic. So there is potentially millions to billions of dollars sitting in burner addresses right now on multiple EVMs. And after this happened, they basically figured out that the reason why this exploit even worked in the first place, it had something to do with gasless transaction upgrade. Keep in mind, Ethereum has gasless transaction upgrade. Almost all EVMs have some form of the gasless transaction upgrade. This one, because of it, sometimes will produce a 0 output instead of a null or error or random output other than 0. And that 0 output basically, with the way the signer setup, makes it look like proper transaction, and it is transacted. It's almost like pre-signing a transaction, but not. And this unique setup where both he is the null address sender and receiver, but the OP is where I think he really gets the funds. So the OP of the transaction just sends the funds to his actual wallet. So large portions of funds in that wallet. And so he's circumstating these effects. Now we have to go, okay, when is it going to be, or is it going to be how long or whatever, until someone figures out how to pull like dead articles out of the burner address NFTs and start using them, or they are able to gain dead key sets, dead data sets, dead anything, dead tokens. A token for Metaverse says, hey, we want to make this token more viable. We've got a good community. They burn X amount of those tokens. Now someone just goes and requests those tokens and pulls it out of the burner address. So now we're like, okay, well, if we burn tokens to show action or to show growth or as a milestone or anything like that, there's a chance it could be taken. This means that some of the simplest actions that you do on your EVMs, you're not going to want to really do anymore. And a lot of metaversing that's done on these types of chains, they highly revolve around some blockchain actions. And there have been some where it's like there's a preset, there's a sell, and then once you're playing the game, certain things causes a change of something. And in that case, they basically, you send in your NFT that you got to sell, and they send you a different one. And what you're actually doing, just sending your NFT to the burner address, and when they see that it's in the burner address, they send you, or they send the sender of that, the appropriate airdrop. And so stuff like that means that the thing that shouldn't be able to be used is going to be able to be used. And then you have to ask questions is like, if the game is connected to the blockchain in a manner to where it's, okay, this is a one-time use item, so they go ahead and they imprint the coordinal number or the NFT ID onto your account. So if someone's able to put it at the burner, are they actually able to gain access? Are they able to affect my account? Are things able to be done? Could they potentially maybe burn it again to prove they own my account to get it transferred to a new key set, or to get the password changed over? I think the implication of simply moving money out of the burner address, that's a scary situation, because so much can happen out of it just because of what's been used for in the past, and the amount of money that's just kind of locked up there, or just sitting there. Now we know it's not really locked up like we originally thought, just sitting there. There's a lot of things that could happen very quickly, very easily, and I honestly do think it could affect definitely metaverses in any way, shape, or form. But I think if it's going to affect it the most, it's going to be the games are actually connected, and the actual like value worth of assets and things. So, for example, you get the game that you're playing, metaverse you're in. There's a bunch of game governance tokens. So they hit a milestone, they hit a certain number of user base. So they burn a bunch of the tokens to help everyone's value worth of that supply go up. Then a few years later, someone gains access to those tokens from the burner address. And now the value just immediately dumps pretty hard because so many more tokens are out there. What up, Mr. Trek? See if it'll let you in. But yeah, what if it to get those tokens, so the value of the token dumps? So now your governance token is worth less. It's people who are holding it in speculation probably going to sell, or some of them, like we see that often, right? And so weekend's going to fall out. But things like that could cause troubling impact that could cause that shockwave or that avalanche of action that ends up becoming like a complete total downfall. Look at Big Nick actually started falling because Texas said, hey, we think you're a scam, and then it just kind of snowballed very quickly as people started pulling out and all this other stuff. So that would definitely hurt something like this. What up, bro?
Sorry, I'm a minute or two behind. Did you get into the title, and did you do housekeeping, or do I need to deal with that?
All right, so I kind of explained the title a little bit and just a tiny bit of the back point, and then I was just going into like a scenario of within the back point of money was pulled out of that burner address and how that could affect metaverses directly. I did not do house cleaning yet, and I didn't actually go into the other aspects or things we were talking about either. Just giving out that one example.
All right, so let me get into the housekeeping, and hola, buenos noches, buenos dias, and buenos tardes, and everything else for everyone who will either join us eventually or hear this later on down the road, especially if you see it on the YouTube side, as we do rebroadcast these episodes of Metaverses the Other Side on the Gentlemen of Crypto YouTube channel, which comes out on Friday at 11 p.m. We do appreciate the folks who are tapping in. It is definitely a slow and steady, be consistent of delivery and content to get people aware. And like we've been saying from the beginning, we're not everybody's cup of tea. We do a lot of geeking out about the tech stuff, and X amount of times we go off on tangents in total opposite direction of what the title of the episode is called. But nonetheless, we are not grifters. # we are not tourists. We do tinker and break things in this space that we call metaverses. Some folks might call it the whole Web3 thing, but we're not grifters is the bottom line of it. And case in point, we did two things. We made a website called Metaversal Toolbox, which basically is open source tools that allow you to build in metaverses, do things such as like NFTs and things along that line, and smart contracts that are no code, low code options. Things do have to be updated because where they were open source, let's say 6-9 months ago, or 8 months ago when we first did the website that is hosted on IPFS. By the way, if you're into decentralized storage, please do add us into your IPFS node. We would greatly appreciate that with the Metaversal Toolbox, because the idea is that we want to give, or not give, but provide technology as open source as it can be to those who, not everybody gonna have the money to pay for an Adobe. It doesn't mean that there aren't free open source versions of Adobe that you can use that will help you create and build and do some pretty interesting things, as long as you have the wherewithal to take the time out in learning how to use those tools, right? And the website Metaversal Toolbox, that's one of those things that we want to get out there for folks who are into the more hands-on-y, tinkery, I like to DIY stuff part of the space, because we also have low code and code ready options of tools too. The other thing is that we put together Builder DAO, which is like a builder's guild, but we primarily focus on the uplift metaverse. We're working on something else that's going to move us over, or at least expand us into another metaversal space, but that's for a little bit more acknowledgement down the road once we figure out our proof of concept. It is one of the funniest but yet most exciting learning processes to fumble your way through the back end of the tech. Because granted, you're going to fumble, granted, you're going to break things, granted, you're going to fail, but you're going to learn a whole bunch of stuff. So when we say the things that we say about this blockchain technology, this Web3 technology, this open source technology, decentralization of whatever platform and stuff, it isn't because we just talking out our asses, or that we're going on the bandwagon of like being anti-centralization on stuff. No, it's because we actually mess around with the tech and know the pros and cons of when centralization of some kind is appropriate versus when it's totally not needed and just a cash grab, which is a lot of the space right now. But anywho, enough of my tangent, enough of the housekeeping. Let's get into the subject. So a little bit of backstory in addition to what 3D said. It was this morning, I seen a post, and the post was by my guy Wealth, and Wealth basically was like, oh, so Polygon goes down, but nobody says nothing compared to when Solana went down, and the FUD was all over the place about it. So I'm like, well, what is he talking about? What do you mean Polygon went down? Is it that they turned off the chain like what Solana was doing last year multiple times? Or is it that someone hacked something and then, all right, bet it was a bigger doozy than they thought? So I reposted out 3D sees it. He says something. So that's one event that happened in regards to the last like 24, 36 hours. That's one event related to. Another thing, as I'm reading through, God, what was I reading through? I forgot what thread I was reading through. It was either something related to Coinbase or it was something on a different, no, that's what it was. I was searching through Twitter, doing like a search, hashtag search. I found a post that was recent, and I'm gonna try to add this into the Jumbotron so people can see it later on. That was basically like, hey, there was a white hacker who got paid $2 million for being able to reverse a transaction out of a null address. Now, if you are not a technical person and you don't understand what that means, that is a huge set of implications, ramifications, in that this was able to be done on Polygon. Now, if you look at anything digital from or anything cyber related from a security perspective, the question is always phrased in a when, like when is this going to happen versus a if this is going to happen. And that's kind of always been my thought process on how right now, quote, we're not able to reverse transactions out of null addresses, which is basically in the more popular term, non-technical, is when they talk about burning a token or burning an NFT. You basically send that NFT or that transaction asset to a wallet or to an address that it does not have an out function. It only has an in function. So that's the second thing that happened. I tagged 3D in this and I'm like, bro, I think we need to talk about this. Why? Because at least in our minds, we instantly start running down the negative rabbit hole of like, how can this be gamified and what would it mean? And so that's X amount of the backstory. I'm gonna let 3D get back into it for a minute while I find the post to add it into the Jumbotron so other folks can see this later on.
Now, when you first came in, that's actually what I was doing. I was running down like the what could this mean type of rabbit hole. The downfall, which basically means anything sent to the burner address can be retrieved by someone else. That's what it means. And then how many EVMs does this affect? Could be any of them or all of them. Like we know that the specific type of cashless transaction upgrade that Matic has is somewhat unique, but we also know that all of the EVMs have some form of the same upgrade. So does this glitch exist in all of them? Or is this a natural glitch that we're just now figuring out? Because it's not always every time you request the transaction. You know, it's just sometimes you get a 0, which is when it transacts, instead of a random output or a null. And that's kind of scary because it's like the more we build on this and then we realize, oh, some of these upgrades cause actual issues. You know, like that's some of the reasons why Bitcoin used to always never upgrade. And then, like, I know, like, Danish Crypto, he was actually just telling me yesterday, the day before, we got into it real big, like 4 or 5 of us actually all got into it real big, where we were talking about the ordinal system kind of got adopted very, very quickly, even though this type of system has existed before. And they were kind of like saying, hey, what if, you know, this adoption causes problems? Well, we're seeing something like that right here. An adoption for gasless possible transactions by mainnet user to user. So where someone can basically prepay for your gas, and that allows you to have a gasless transaction. That whole upgrade caused this ability to pull out of the burner address. That's, I don't know, man. To me, that's just like, it's more scary than anything, just because what if the same type of thing can be done to your address from my address? What if someone they send me 0.00001 Matic or whatever, and then they pull out all my Matic after about 3 hours of mining? Then would that be more beneficial? Something like that. In that case, you could do any wallet, right? Any amount of value, any amount of wealth. And then when it comes down to like, what if it's the NFTs themselves? Could you force push NFTs out? If so, how many controlling NFTs for projects or metaverses are in those those wallets or that front address? What if this does work on actual wallets? How many of these big DAOs could go in and pull it out? So a lot of negative possibility. So we also noticed when the Solana went down, was around time frame, there was a 150 block reorg. And when that happened, it was like 44% of an entire block's gas fee was spent to do that reorg. And then almost immediately, 55% an entire block's gas fee was spent to reorg. And so something that I think Trek originally brought up was like, what if the reorg was originally about the, the whole it was reorged. And that's a bit strange, but at the same time, what if that really was like user to user? What if that was someone noticed that happened and was able to build a script and built the script, and within a handful of blocks later, because I mean they're within 12 seconds, and I think they were like technically the same block, so it would have been the very next block. So within 12 seconds, was able to push a script to simply do whatever the last block actually was, and actually it lays over the exact same block number and the exact same previous hash. So it was specifically done in a manner to where the reorg was done in a manner to where the original previous hash is still the original previous hash, and the reorg was done in a manner to where the original previous hash is still the original previous hash, which means that the reorg was done literally the very next block, and it was done specifically in a way or manner that was kind of automated. So I almost feel like either someone or group of people said, hey, did you see that? They flipped the switch and their miners went for it, right? Or not really miners, but their wallets went for it. So they're staking, right? So they got to have a high stake profile, right? They're trying to validate this or trying to push it to the validators or something. But what this also could be was just simply control. They could have just shut down the chain, fixed it, and put the chain back up. So now we have this question of, was this fixed in the same manner that Solana fixes their chain? Like kind of how BSC fixes their chain, they just reboot their chain and they go on in your database when they come back up? Or was this like how Bitcoin Cash kept a reorg from happening on Bitcoin Cash 2 different times, where they literally just invoked miners to push out a reorg? In this case, it would be validators going to push for a reorg. And now this is the question. This is what's really, because if this was like an individual group of people or whatever, this was the hopeful point of what actually happened, individual validators or whatever said, hey, did you see that? Or some kind of button was pushed and all validators were immediately prompted about some scenario where they could work together to fix something. Or, like, I know that's super centralized, but at the same time, if it was actually individuals, then that means a DAO could actually potentially fight for a chain. And at the same time, say, yeah, that's centralized, but it's done in a decentralized manner, so decentralized. I know it's not really a decentralized concept because it's proof of stake, but imagine and boom, we all work in a decentralized manner to go ahead and work for the help. And at the same time, if that's the case, what about block war? Where as soon as that block is reorged, some other broadcast is sent out to reorg the reorg, which then as soon as that happens, it's then sent out to again and again and again, and we can have a permanent block loss where we get new blocks, but every new block is just a correction of the previous block. You could eventually even get to a point where you try to continue on, but the next reorg would then reverse all the new ones. Yeah, Broseph.
All right, sorry. A couple of things. One, it might have been because of where I was driving, but yeah, Twitter, the Spaces was definitely rugging on your audio for a good minute on what you were saying on my side. So it's gonna kind of suck that when I do the post-production stuff later on, I'm gonna have to cut that part out because I know you said some good stuff. The other thing to know for folks sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say, don't worry, bro, your audio keeps cutting out here and there too.
Damn. All right. So it's probably the whole me being in mobile right now. But the other thing to note, like for folks who are still like, I thought you guys don't do price talk. Like, why you talk about this? This is not, well, actually, this is on two fronts, right? In regards to this particular situation, but I want to say each builds on the other, but in different ways. And then the things that me and 3D might be thinking off head of how it could have ripple effects, those are just probable possibilities. There's things that we're not even thinking of, in all honesty. And for folks who are like, I thought this was about metaverses, what are we actually saying here? Let me put some context on it. If you are able to reverse a transaction on Polygon, which is in the EVM ecosystem, and I honestly thought I didn't see Polygon being the first one doing it, so that's kind of what surprised me. One, two is that if this was able to happen on Polygon, that means it can happen on one of the other EVM chains. And it might not, quote, work the same way because they'll figure out how to do a patch for the upgrade. But guess what? It doesn't change the fact that we now know it is possible to actually reverse a transaction. So now the next question comes into, let's talk about tokenomics. There are a number of blockchain projects within the EVM ecosystem and the Cosmos ecosystem and the Cardano ecosystem that use the burning mechanism as a way to keep their price point at a certain level, right? You can, if the function or the ability to retrieve becomes propagated throughout other blockchains and other ecosystems, the level of risk that brings to your tokenomics, right, how you would be, that's a whole new level of headache. If you're somebody who has X amount of a bag of a coin or token, well, we're really talking about tokens because this has to do with the smart contract side of stuff. Guess what? Again, that brings you as a bag holder a whole new level of headache, right? Compared to somebody who isn't holding any tokens, because now let's say somebody wants to mess with or manipulate the price of the token that you have. Guess what? That's now a probability because it's been proven, or at least based on this Polygon situation, it shows that, hey, you can actually retrieve or reverse a transaction out of a null address. Now, here's where the metaverse side of it comes in. You have an NFT project, you buy it, you have some kind of metadata that shows you have control or some level of access to this this digital asset in your wallet. 5 days later, no, let's say that NFT is one of those projects where if you burn it, it allows you to gain access to something else. Or if you burn like, what's the joints that Ken did where you could burn the two different NFTs together and it's like the blunt hash joint? So now, and that's on Wax protocol. I'm not specifically talking Wax. I'm just saying the scenario of if you have an NFT that works where it unlocks a function or makes something new when you burn one or two or more of those things together, what happens if you're able to reverse the transaction and pull out that NFT asset as far as the transaction part of it out of a null address, which is how you burn NFTs. You send them to null addresses. What does that mean for the tokenomics or the price point stuff of that NFT? What does that mean for positive control of a digital asset? If it can be reversed out by someone else outside of the actual original purchaser or the creator of that contract, what does that mean? And on the security side of it, that's a whole can of worms. On the speculative price point side of it, it's a whole can of worms because it makes for a whole new equation of what your risk level is. Your counterparty risk, that's a new whole attack vector right there. That's the point that I'm trying to make about this whole thing with metaverses. And so now, remember, NFTs are the skins, NFTs are the items, NFTs are the land. So imagine that. You have a land that you paid X amount for, and then all of a sudden, 5 days after you bought it, you see that the transaction isn't there anymore. And somehow you've lost access to, or like, let's say something like you lost access to that NFT plot, that the land that it was connected to. So what do? Who do you go to on that? Do you go to the project that made the NFT land? Do you go to the wallet that you're using to hold that NFT in? Do you go to the token manufacturer who is the company or project that actually made the token itself? Like, who's accountable for that if someone figured out how to do a hack and reversing a transaction on an NFT? Because I just named 3 different parties. Or is that on you because you might have did something to compromise yourself in regards to like naming that you had the stuff to begin with? Where do you go from there on that? I don't know.
Yeah, bro.
Go ahead, bro.
Like, a lot of people on Ethereum-based blockchains, one thing they love to do is you burn an NFT, you get an item from a store. It's like almost like a coupon code. So you could basically double spin an NFT over and over and over again.
I so thought of that too. Bro, we on the same wave. We on the same. I thought of the same thing earlier today. I just didn't say it now.
Or it's like you're playing a game and you got to burn a certain set of NFTs in order to get a special gun or whatever. And on the secondary market in the game, that gun might be worth some money, right? But then someone figures this out and they're able to produce millions of these guns at a time and able to undercut the market dramatically, where they make more money over the long end of selling tons of these, right, for very little. How does that help your game experience? Or what if it's an item that, because of the whole situation and everything going on, a lot of people have burned it, and then now only one person, someone reverses, they own all of the item, and they make it extremely expensive to own or to obtain, but it's for a game. So it's like, okay, now what? But at the same time, bro, so like, what if a game company figures out how to go, you want to burn something, you send it to us, we send it to the burn address, and then instead of making a new asset, we just return it back the next time it's needed. So I mean, like, there could be potential benefits from an exploit like this, could there?
Yo, you went dead on me just now. You were talking, and then I lost you.
I was just saying, like, if the game company that's doing the NFT game had you send the item to them as for the burn, and then they actually do the burn, could they use an exploit like this to pull back the item the next time it's needed instead of producing a new NFT? So could this exploit have benefit?
Arguably, it could have benefit, but at the same time, if that's what you're doing, then do you because okay, then when you get into the metadata of that asset, does it change per each time it's like retransactioned? You get what I'm saying? Like, does it count as a fresh new mint if I reversed from a null and then pushed it back through again? Would that count as a new mint?
I would assume it would show that it went from zero back to you to like the company to zero back to the company. Like, we would just see it as a new transaction in the list of transaction history.
Would that also be a new form of wash trading?
Yeah, that easily could be where you have a derivative address, you send something in there, and then someone who has your derivative address actually pulls it out, and then they perform the actual transaction. No one knows it's a derivative address, but at the same time, as soon as they pull it, they send it, so you don't have any claim over it no more, and then it looks like two completely different transactions that have nothing to do with each other. That could be a new way of like coin join.
Listen, folks, I know we out here throwing out these wild ass scenarios, but here's what I know. Here's what I know. I might not know exactly how to code. I might not know how to be a lawyer because I'm not. So they say financial advice. I definitely ain't a CPA, and I'm not a financial advisor. But one thing I do understand, if me and this guy can like think of these ideas, I'm gonna say a 10 out of 10, there's actually somebody out there who technically figured out how to execute it, or will eventually figure out how to execute these things that we're talking about. And track record to show for what it is, if you listen to the old episodes of the things that we talk about, there are projects, there are different instances of those things coming to fruition. They may not be on like the grand scale, the major money maker, super duper Coinbase related project or whatever, but we do have things that we've said where it's like, oh wow, somebody made that. Oh, right, that's dope. Like, we thought of that a while ago, or like it inspired us when we first heard of a variation of that story, and then we took the idea on another level up. Like, we're not just talking out our asses on this stuff, folks. The idea of that being able to reverse a null transaction is a potential thing. It's not potential. What is the word I'm looking for? It's a difference between like probable and possible. We're not talking about is it possible to do this. We're talking about the probability of people doing it, which means that it can be done. It's just like, well, how long before somebody has enough wherewithal and interest to do it?
Yeah, I think the biggest point of this whole thing is we now, like, it's proven it works. Someone did it. They did it. And not only did they do it, they released how they did it, they released all the information about it. So, like, other people can now do this. Other people can try this. And then we start, like, really seeing what this means. Because there are tons of companies out there that they do these things where, like earlier I was talking about, you make a derivative address, where there are tons of companies where they have one main address, and all of the transactions being done amongst the users of that company are all derivatives of that main address. So it's this one private key holds power of all of those addresses, right? So imagine the types of things they could do, where they could offer reversible transactions to companies. Yeah, go on this blockchain because we can actually reverse it. If something happens, we can reverse it. You could get some more of those like fiat benefits that people absolutely fucking love. That it's like, okay, you get scammed, reverse the scam, because we don't know how far this type of transaction reversing or whatever. We don't know how far it can actually go. So what if it can go to actual addresses and not just a null address? means that you could, if you at one time you had 2 million, like imagine that, like you get one Bitcoin, it's worth $5. You spend that Bitcoin over time as it goes up in value. By the time Bitcoin's worth $60,000, you no longer have that one Bitcoin. What if you could reverse all of it and get that one Bitcoin back at $60,000?
Okay. So you said something that made me think of this. So one of the reasons or issues that traditional finance industry has with crypto is that whole thing of like one-way transaction. Like once you send it, you have no way of retrieving it unless you get the other wallet to send it back to you, which means you have to get the other person or the smart contract to make the call of sending back, right? So imagine that someone takes this function and implements it to be like the way that we do you know, like how if you spend something on your credit card and then chargebacks, this arguably could be reworked and relabeled, bro, to be a chargeback function for, let's say you bought something, it was a bad purchase, the item, blah, blah, blah. Okay, here's how you're gonna do the chargeback of it. Granted, that's not a null address, and that would be more of a reverse, but like, how am I saying this? If there was something in where, how am I saying this? It might change a little bit if you, how am I saying this? The change would be that it's not going to a null address. So it's a one-way transaction. It's not a, it could be a one-way transaction, but it's not a null address, right? So like you're paying for something in a department store, and let's say the thing gets messed up and you have to return it, and they're like, oh, well, we only do exact returns back or whatever. Would this be something that could be this particular function of like pulling back a transaction? And arguably we already have those in certain smart contracts and certain stable coins. The smart contract owners can do stuff like that. So like USDC can reverse transactions. There's somebody else that does it too that I can't remember right now, but I can see this being changed into something that would work more towards a traditional industry of being able to do chargebacks, and the idea that you can then automate doing the chargeback. Does it make sense of where I went just now?
Yeah, I was kind of hinting at a chargeback style setup as well. So yeah.
Like, again, the idea of that, the technology in blockchain in these different use cases of whether we're talking tokens, whether we're talking NFTs, whether we're talking the coin, or like what other way you're trying to do the transaction. The basic idea is that someone figured out how to reverse out of null addresses, aka burner addresses. And so arguably this changes the landscape for not just tokens, but also for metaverses that have some kind of token or NFT within that ecosystem. That's the point, y'all.
So something I want to point out is there is this thing called, like, in some of the metaverses being built, they're doing this stuff where you can either stake coins into a pool in order to obtain a small bonus or a temporary bonus for your gameplay or your character. A lot of times these are like going to be, there's a couple RPGs where they're looking at this, and then there's one where they also are going to do this thing where you can burn their in-game asset. It's a token. You burn it to the burn address, and you'll get a permanent upgrade. So like when you want to level up, you would actually just send it to the burner address a certain amount, and then basically the game checks your transaction history to the burner address for their token, and it just filters real quick, and it says, okay, so you got this many level up, and it just automatically inserts the data for you when you're viewing it. So stuff like that, where that's going to heavily affect the gameplay.
If you're slick with it, and let's say that no one's really paying attention to this whole burner null address retrieve thing, what you would then do is you'd be like, all right, I'm gonna do it once for myself, I'm gonna go back and retrieve it out, and then I would go and sell it to other people. If you can cross it, exactly. Like I would go and sell it to other people and be like, yo, it costs you this much for you to have the same function and feature. And I'm not 100% on the thought on the technical part of like how would you connect like the validating wallet address and then like the other either avatar in whatever ecosystem that is, that metaverse platform, like being able to move it between multiple avatars. But I imagine that it wouldn't take somebody too long to figure it out.
Yeah, bro. So like something like that, normally all they do is they just filter your transaction history, your transaction history. They just filter it, and then they look for their token, and then or their first vendor address, and then they filter out for just their token. So there's a chance that if you was to reverse a null address send of their token, they might count that as 2 level ups, like 2 sets of burns, because it's not actually looking at in or out. It's just looking how many transactions to that address of this token. That's all they're looking at, or how many number of tokens of that with that address. They're not looking at it to or from. They're just looking at that address, this token, and then they're like how many transactions or how many tokens. So there's a potential here that when you get it back and then you sell it, you actually double the amount of funds you have. And if that works, then there's no reason for you to just keep sending it back and forth. Spend some gas, and if the amount of whatever you're receiving in gain for that burn and retrieve is less the amount of cost in gas, then you have a money building system. You do this, boom, 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 boom. Now you have in-game asset that you can then sell outside of. Now you have another way to then black market your in-game assets on chain by doing it off chain. Now you can go off chain. You can go on eBay and say, like, okay, I'm going to sell you 6 billion of this gold on here. It's worth millions of dollars. to sell it to you for $5,000, and then they go, okay, cool. You make the transaction on eBay. Then you guys go in. They just send it to your wallet address that you give them through eBay. And boom, there they go. There's 5 billion gold or whatever for the game, and you get $5,000 USD or whatever fiat or whatever you're looking at or how you want to handle that. And at the same time, you could still have that item.
Yo, you know what that just made me think of? And I'm slow on this one because I just learned the phrase today, talking with another homeboy about what is it? Off-band pricing or off-band payments, where you basically use like some outside of the norm. Not norm, but outside of the crypto on-chain transaction so like, how on a crypto transaction on a marketplace, you can pay the gas fee to like push up your transaction. So then you can also go outside of that to pay in cash or some sort of fiat to bump it up even more to put your transaction into the next block. And it's called, what is it? Off-band payment or off-band something?
That kind of sounds like the robot system. Like there are these entire ecosystems where they have bots that just fight for the next block. So you're probably just going to their website to pay.
Oh, well, okay. So with this one, it's actually going to the miners directly and then paying extra on top of what you're already paying in the on-chain transaction. But you're paying them outside of like the crypto chain transaction stuff.
Yeah. That's one of the bots. The bot is just an automated system that it's a program that performs the transaction output to ensure the next block. And that's the reason why like Ethereum's prices originally went up super high, is because OpenSea, Wearable, and a different NFT platform, I can't remember what they were, but it's like super rare or something. It was like one of the competing ones back in the day. They all built a bot to compete for the next block, so they can ensure that when people went to go to mint, it would mint within first couple of seconds. And that's a lot of these bot systems that exist. They kind of expanded, and you just go to a website and you can pay all sorts of different ways, and you give them your I think your announce number. There's something you give them, and that's how they can ensure it gets put into their bot to be in the next block. But yeah, I have heard of that, and I've like traditionally we refer to like the bots themselves as just the fee bot war, but I did not know they had a name for when you actually use that service. That's new to me.
Oh yeah, I just learned that today, like literally earlier today. Yo, they are wilding out in the streets out here, like you can't get hit. Anywho, nonetheless, like I said, folks, we out here talking about the situation with Polygon, that someone was able to do a reverse transaction in the Polygon network from a null address. And then the other thing that happened was there was a 150 block reorg that happened not once but twice. And the idea was that the first person paid X amount of ETH to be able to do a reorg of 150 blocks, and then someone else or some persons followed up behind them and then did another reorg to put back what the first reorg had did. Now, some people might say this is a good thing because it shows that this is like community policing, and there's a way to correct when like questionable or bad actors do something within a chain. for on-chain activity. And others might say, well, no, that means your chain is too vulnerable and you could probably get some other kind of attack. And imagine if somebody had, you know, the bank to be able to be like, oh, well, I wanted to go this way. And then there was a ping pong game going on of 2 or more parties reorganizing each other's blockchain thing. Like, imagine the mess that level of back and forthing would have made on Polygon. Now, granted, the other issue being is the way there was a certain news source that reported on the story, and it didn't make sense to me because they basically said like, oh, it wasn't an issue with the chain, which made no sense if you're telling me that 150 blocks got reorganized. Like, yeah, something happened on the chain. I'm gonna call it was CoinDesk that said that, by the way. They might have reversed their story by now, but initially that's what they had said. And I'm trying to find that other story for that. I'll probably find it later on and add it in.
So just for people listening in later, it's actually there's a series of threads on Twitter that cover all the same points. That's where some of the stories I think where he's going to pull up actually pull from that data. So if you really want to know more, just do some searching on Twitter for, what was it, Matic, reorg, 150 plus. Those are your key phrases. Do it in similar order chips, maybe change it around to see what you get. But it was very recent, like within the past couple of days, I believe. And I think it was discovered, I want to say 26 hours after the second transaction. But as odd as it is, when it was first pointed out on Twitter, it had already been reorged, but they didn't ever mention it. Someone else came in and commented the fact that it had been already corrected. And it's really, really difficult to figure out which one is the current version, which block is considered the active block, because it does not actually specify active or orphaned on either one. And the only thing there is there's a few key points when you're looking through the basic Polygon scanner, whatever it's called. On both of them, they'll have a lot of the same points, but on I think one of them, I think the time frame is like their exact same time frame points or something. But it was around there. It was one of the data points around the time frame that was different, and that shows that, hey, look, this was the current standing or whatever. And then on other scans for Polygon, which I don't know what they actually are. I know someone in the comment thread of the original thread actually had posted it, where they were like, I don't even see the reorg, and they had posted a different scanner at the time. But at that time, Polygon was down, so the scanner they showed, it was basically like a node. Basically, it was just like a backup node or something. It was just like previous data. It wasn't live, right? So it was like they were like, I don't see what the reorg you're talking about, and the only one that showed was the second one, the D reorg. This isn't the first time we've seen a D reorg, but this is the first time we've seen a D reorg on a chain at this quickly, which means, once again, just because your chain is fast does not mean your chain is secure.
Sorry, I was trying to get through the apps. Yeah, so faster is not always better, folks. Bottom line, faster is not always better. No matter what folks try to shill at you about, oh, it's about transaction throughput and blah, blah, blah. Like, no, look at Solana. Now, this situation with Polygon, I imagine some other things are going to come up on the horizon in relation to this new technical reveal, as well as I think this situation, as far as the reorg stuff, it's going to open up Polygon to start acting like Solana, as far as like, oh, this situation happened, we need to shut down. And you know what? They're not even the only ones doing that. Helium was doing the same thing. Like, I'm so disappointed in how the voting had turned into just like speculatively driven decisions versus like technical, like, hey, we might not be, quote, making all of the money right now, but like 5-10 years down the road, like the technology will be more prevalent and it will be integrated better. But that's a whole nother thing onto itself. The major point that I'm trying to make is there's a handful of blockchains that have already been doing the thing of, we'll turn off our chain and stop public access in order to tweak or, quote, fix something or reverse a transaction or freeze stuff for whatever the reason is. And the argument has always been, once you do it once, you can always find another reason to do it again. It just so happens Solana did it like 8 times. Just saying.
I think it's a good point to point out that once it was figured out that you could pause a chain, it started being programmed into chains to the base layer. So there are actual chains where you couldn't even stop devs from pausing it.
Yeah, sorry, bro. I'm over here like trying to maneuver through tuk-tuks and vans and other vehicles.
It's all good. That's why I was going a little bit slower in my speech, just to give time for the repeat and all that. But yeah, like I know like Solana, BSC, just a couple other chains. There's a few alternative chains where there are things they can do that devs can do that there's not anybody else can do unless you're another dev or you're a higher dev. Like there are some of these dev projects where they have like layers of dev permissions even, and this is going to show forth like the true centralized versus decentralized nature. I know like you've been here for multiple bear runs, and you know every time there's a bear run, the longer the bear run, the more centralized systems fall during it. And so if there's any centralized stuff within cryptocurrency, the bear is where it falls.
Yeah, I was having a conversation earlier today, something similar about how what gets me with a lot of these chains and things, or like these projects that are built on chains, is they'll have these non-transparent business models that they're looking to run on a technology that is inherently transparent if you're saying you're doing it in an actual like an open chain, a public chain. If you're not doing that, then when you try to, if your business model is not open like that, when you actually do try to run financial things on it that are not that, then guess what? You have a shelf life, there will be a cycle, and you will end up getting screwed at some point. And that's when certain departments and agencies come a knocking.
Bro, I was on a social blockchain platform thing, and I was doing a live stream where I was talking about the system and everything. I was just like going through everything I thought about it and stuff. I was like doing an honest review, like third point all the way through. And I even pointed out how I could tell the differences between some transactions in the blockchain based on certain points of information or whatever. And I remember the guy who did that blockchain over, he contacted me afterwards because I also had wrote a paper with it, and he thanked me for the information and this and that. And he was like, I didn't realize you guys could tell when people were commenting or tipping or a direct money transfer. Like I didn't know you guys could actually tell that type of stuff just from like the blockchain. Like so sometimes when the people who build the things, because like the guy that I was talking to, he was one of the main devs as well as the main front runner as well as the founder, builder, thought of person, you know, the main person, the CEO and everything. And he was like, sometimes they don't know what is there, and these tiny little exploits and things allows us to figure it out, right? Because sometimes we build stuff and we're like, afterwards we're looking at it and we're going, that works that way. Or sometimes you're building something and something messes up, but then something else does something you're not expecting, and now that's a feature. So then you still have this bug though hidden inside that feature, and it takes time to find all these little things. So it's just like, I think the biggest implication of this, really what it means is that the concept of what these programmable blockchain systems and networks can do are not fully known, and even the businesses that are building on them are not fully known of what's going on or what can be seen. Like imagine what happened when the Binance Smart Chain guy imagine his face when he found out that someone on the internet noticed the block stamp timing indifference from one day to the next, 6 days in a row, last December, and was basically able to backtrack and find out that they had been turning off and on the blockchain for about an hour a day for like 5-6 days in a row for months and months and months and months. And now they know, like they've always admitted it's a full iterative chain, but some random Joe Smo just saw the block stamping. Hey, there was no blocks for an hour, and I sent transactions during this time frame that when they happen, they have a stamp in between these two blocks. Like so, like at first we were calling it hidden block syndrome, and then eventually they figured out, oh no, this isn't hidden block syndrome. This is authoritative chain in progress. What happened was all transactions that happened while the chain was off were buffered. And so all of those have actual timestamps and the buffer data and everything. And then when the chain came back on, it was just already pre-applied to the database. So it was just boom, it was there. And you know, like they did that Binance Smart, I don't remember his name. I think you know his name. Did he even know? Like, could you imagine if he did not know that people could see that on that transparency, that type of transparency?
Yeah, it's funny how, like, for as much as we talk about like privacy and anonymity and pseudonymity, but then to realize like the level of transparency that is there in regards to seeing activity, like being able to trace and track provenance in activity, not the whole thing of the privacy side of it of knowing who did what, but just being able to follow. It still amazes me that people really don't understand like they're two different things. So like you can what am I saying? Like you can be anonymous or pseudonymous, right? But it doesn't mean that your transactions can't be followed and tracked and like but without like giving up your PII level of information. Like all of that stuff can still be tracked and followed, but without giving out the PII side of it, right? And yet people still do some really stupid things on chain that are connected to the PII, which is crazy to me. If you don't know what PII is personally identifiable information. Sorry. Also, go ahead.
The guy that one of the people that either researched and found the thing that we were talking about with the Null reverse and the Solana the actual reorg commented, like someone commented on that block, and it appears on all forms of that block, both the reorg and the de-reorg versions, because of the number, the hash number it is. That's what it's set to, is that hash, not the actual like the block number, not the actual hash. And so like people think that might have been the guy who actually performed the original reorg.
Interesting. Do we call this community policing, folks? I feel like for a number of the stories that I have seen come out over the last couple of months, I've been questioning this thing about community policing, and is there a proper way of community policing? Is there supposed to be oh well, you have to just put it out to the public and let everyone deal with it with that, you know, new information? Or is it that you have to go through quote proper channels, the legal channels, and like is that the best way to enforce or to use community policing? And I'm gonna give an example of something, bro. The situation that happened with Caitlin Long. If you don't know, Caitlin Long, former Wall Street type, she's out there in Wyoming. She worked with X amount of the state regulators and the bureaucrats and the governor, and they were able to do, they're putting a bill into place that says like, you don't have to give up your private keys. Like that's law for Wyoming residents. If you're not from Wyoming, that's a whole different story. It ain't got signed by the governor yet, as far as I know, but I know that bill is like supposed to be on this table or something. And then there's some other stuff that they've been doing to make themselves be the more crypto regulatory friendly state. My point about Caitlin Long is she was given information to the SEC, like, yo, here's the proof. This company is doing blah, 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 blah. I got the evidence here. They told her, mind your business. We ain't worried about what you're talking about. As a matter of fact, you need to start showing us some of your paperwork. Lo and behold, X amount of months later, what happens? Yo, give me a second real quick on 3D.
Yeah, that's some crazy stuff. I don't know the full story on Caitlin Long with that whole thing, but I haven't seen some stuff here and there, so I follow her. Super glad you're giving us more insight on this, because I do want to know the rest. I just know that like SEC have been backstabbing absolutely everyone, and even like old partnerships they had to settle scores and hit down on things from past, they've turned their back to and have done things like basically stabbed them in the back later on. Yeah, Rosa.
All right, so sorry about that. Again, moving around in the city, right? So the other thing to note about it is, it basically goes, she follows the proper channels. She goes to the authority, she goes to the SEC, says, here's the evidence that shows this organization, this company is not on the up and up. They're doing some funky things. She gets the door slammed in her face, and then all of a sudden, she starts having to worry about paperwork and certain things of compliance for the company that she has called, I think, Custodia Bank or something like that. Now, she followed the proper channels. She went through, you know, what is supposed to be the organization, the entity or whatever that looks out for us. But lo and behold, hold on one second, bro.
Yo, all right, so basically just recapping, finishing up what's going on. Because this is kind of important what he's dropping in on about this, because the SEC is going to do all sorts of stuff.
All right, I'm back. I'm sorry. My bad, bro. So then the other thing to note is that they start asking her for her stuff. Now, again, what I'm saying about this whole thing with like community policing was, did she follow the right process of doing the community policing and following the right channels to then have it be that the same agency that is supposed to help stop scammers, shenanigans, people running illicit kinds of business things, she did the right thing, but then how is it that they didn't stop FTX? How is it they didn't stop Alameda? So now, when we look at the situation of you follow the proper channels of reporting to the right agency and department, but yet no one got arrested, no one's in jail, X number of the regular end people lost their money, or they don't have access to it anymore. Why? Because FTX is in bankruptcy. My thing has been, off of that particular situation, was going to the quote right authorities the right thing to do if at the end of the day it didn't stop the situation and it didn't protect the public. And this is something I feel like we're going to at some point get these questions and these examples asked in the metaverse space, and it's going to be off of the parent companies. That's how I'm looking at it. The parent companies that have put up these metaverses that are either the creators of them or the managers of them, they're going to run into this issue at some point. Okay.
Absolutely.
The whole thing of community policing. I'll hold it.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. There's a lot of things with self-policing that can both be beneficial and scary and helpful, and so always two sides of the coin, always a good and positive and a negative. But at least if it's self-done, there's more probability towards the benefits rather than if it's corporate or government regulated or some other form of done, then it's normally towards the negative. Well, Russell, are you about ready to wrap this up? Is there anything else you want to add in?
Yeah, let's do the wrap up. I really don't have anything else to add in to this situation other than the things that like we've already said. Hopefully we did say something that makes sense to folks out there. Hopefully we said something that either inspires you or gets you to question what's going on in this space. Hopefully we did that. And other than that, I guess, you know, we were checking out Addy next. Metaverse is the other side. Wait, Metaverse is the other side. And the basic idea is we talk about, you know, this Metaverse stuff, this crypto stuff. Other thing to note is we got the website, Metaversal Toolbox. It's on the IPFS. The link for it will be in the description if you're looking at this on the web, on the YouTube side of it. If you're looking at this through the Twitter account, which is Builder DAO, it's also in our description thing there. We highly encourage folks who are about decentralized storage to add this into the IPFS node or whatever type of decentralized storage you have. We would greatly appreciate that as being a part of the cypherpunk movement, as being a part of people who believe in open source technologies and access to various open source tools. We greatly appreciate folks who take that extra step to add the things that we've been building into their, you know, decentralized storage. And another thing again to note is we do this every Thursday at 8 p.m. here on Twitter, and then we have a replay that goes on the Gentleman of Crypto YouTube channel. That is on Fridays at 11 p.m. And actually, well, yeah, let me just leave that one on there. Other than that, like, just want to say thanks for always enlightening me and engaging with me on these topics, 3D. I do appreciate. And hopefully, like I said, for the folks who listen to this later on, something comes out that definitely looks to help you or is of your interest or fancy. Or if you got some questions, the DMs are always open.
I just want to say thank you everybody for dropping in, especially if you're listening to the replay or listen tomorrow in the, well, when it drops into the YouTube side. Come on, join us on Twitter, see what's going on every Thursday, like you said. Hope to see you guys next time. We'd like to invite people who show up. So if you come in, you're almost always going to invite to talk. So come in on your phone so you can come in and chat with us and join the conversation. Who knows, maybe you can help us derail the conversation, make some fun times. And you know what they say, they might accept your cash, crypto, and card, but we'll take your heart for free. We'll enjoy a great day.
All right, bro. Check you later, man.